So when I was about, I think it was about 17 years old, a friend of mine in high school invited me to her church, and she was Catholic. And I'd never been to a Catholic church. She didn't go to church really, but okay, that's fine. And so we had a lovely time, but I remember when I went there, there was this big banner across the front of the entrance to the church. It was a relatively large church, and it said, "Catholics are Christians too." I remember being very baffled by this because it never occurred to me that they weren't. So I asked her about this, like, why this sign? And she said, well, some people believe that Catholics worship Mary, not God. But we worship God. We venerate Mary. We don't worship her. I was like, oh, okay, well, it's kind of an odd thing to think, but okay, didn't really think much about it. Until fast forward about another 4 years, when I went to actually go spend some time in Rome, which, you know, of course, Vatican is right there, it's a little enclave right next to the city of Rome. That's the seat of Catholic power. And I remember being sort of like, oh, that's why people sort of think this, because Mary was everywhere. I mean, everything was Santa Maria this, Santa Maria was the streets, the piazzas, the churches were all Santa Maria this or that, or whatever it is. And I began to sort of understand this concept, like why people would think that. I still thought it was sort of silly, but okay. I remember one time I was just off the Spanish Steps, and I was walking down a street for some reason, and I noticed a little alleyway, and it had a street sign, and it said, La Via de Maria e Gesù, which means the street of Mary and Jesus. And I thought, wow, Jesus gets to be on the street with me, even if it is second billing. But Mary is big. Mary is very big there. And Mary is a really powerful image. Even if it isn't worshipped, it's venerated in our society, this image of Mary. And in particular, I became very fascinated with the images of Mary. And particularly the sort of the sweet pictures of the Mary of Madonna and Child. There we go. So this is the pictures of Madonna and Child, right? You guys have seen a bunch of these. And these are just very typical of the ones that I would see walking around Rome, whether in museums or churches. You saw these everywhere. And I became so fascinated with them, this lovely, beautiful, nurturing image of a mother with her child, that I started to collect them. Everywhere I would go, I'd see postcards, or in the churches, they would give out little pictures of Mary and the child or something. I started to collect these, and I ended up getting like 3 stacks about this high, and then I gave up because there were so many. It was just like the most popular image, I think, in the history of mankind is the Madonna and Child. I think it's beautiful. It was a very sweet image. I always noticed, though, that Mary always seemed to have this very serene look on her face, which always sort of struck me as a little bit odd. Because how many young mothers do you know have a serene look on their face? Right? You know, she looked sort of young. She was young. She definitely was probably very young, humble, and very kind. Sometimes she has her arms out, right, like she's about ready to hug you. But I never saw once, did I ever see her looking sort of pissy, you know, or angry, annoyed, any of those things. And then one day, when I went up to the Vatican, which is where they have the Pietà, right, by Michelangelo. This is a beautiful piece of sculpture. It's just, even the picture just doesn't do it justice. It's absolutely amazing. And it's so striking, right, the Madonna and Child with the baby, and here she is with her baby, right, who's a grown man, and she's holding him in her lap. That's one of the reasons why it was such a radical image. And I remember, again, looking at Mary and going, this does not look like the mother of a 30-year-old man. She's very young, right? And all this kind of got me sort of thinking about how do we see Mary? And what kind of influence does that have in our culture? Because she's almost always depicted as a really compassionate, demure young woman. And for many, she's held up as the ideal of what it means to be a woman, right? That nurturing, compassionate, serene self. But I think this image, unfortunately, has gotten kind of corrupted. That we turn her into a little bit of something of a tender, sweet young thing. Such that women, in order to get by in the world, they have to put on a sweet voice, wear lovely clothes and shiny, shiny shoes, put their hair in curly, curly locks. You know, ladies first. And is that all it means to be a woman? Either being demure and compassionate, nurturing, or a tender, sweet young thing? So I began studying a lot of these images that I collected, and I found that they felt very incomplete to me as I also began to study Mary. Because where was the unwed pregnant teenager who defied authorities? The one who stole away in the night to flee to a foreign land? Or the one who bore a child in a barn? The one who questioned the angel when he came to her and said, "Yeah, I don't know. What are you thinking?" Where was the one who firmly and admonishingly nudged Jesus to start his ministry at a friend's wedding? Where was the woman who wailed at the feet of her beloved son as he was crucified on the cross? Where was the woman who broke the law and came to his tomb to see to his burial? And instead of the three-dimensional Mary, we get sort of this two-dimensional teenage beauty queen image. I want to know where the lawbreaker was, the radical. The woman said, "Okay, God, I will bear your son." So fast forward another 10 years in my life, I began studying more about the ancient world and started looking at the gods and goddesses of the pagan world. And I came across references to Mary that she was sort of, in some ways, she was the embodiment of the divine feminine, right? A way of resurrecting something lost in the goddess worship from the ancient world, a way for the patriarchal world of the Catholic Church to embrace feminine attributes and make them acceptable without sort of feminizing the Trinity. I thought, I don't buy it. Because if you really look at those ancient goddesses, maybe we studied them, but kind of a scary lot. These are not necessarily nurturing, loving things, and there's some of that in there. I'm not talking about the vengeful Greek goddesses, but think about the Valkyries of the Nordic tales. They chose which warriors go to Valhalla. Or the Morrigan, who is the war goddess of the Celts, who appears as a crow. She's about the scariest goddess and the Celtic being in existence. And then there's Mengpo, the goddess of reincarnation, Serket, the Egyptian protector of the dead. These are not tender, sweet young things. They are mighty, they are powerful, they are fierce. And the things that they do for love or to protect those that they love, they can be kind of frightening. They turn people into animals. They go through horrific changes themselves. And they seem a little bit kind of crazy. But that's what the divine feminine is about. It's kind of about a crazy kind of love. The kind of love that will make you say, okay, I'll risk everything and become the bearer of a prophet that will die because that's what the world needs. It's the kind of love that reaches outside of ourselves and it serves the world. It's not a tender, sweet young thing. Let's talk a little bit, just for a moment, about what we mean by feminine. Because remember, if you think about the Taoist principle of the yin and the yang, right? We each have of these, the feminine and the masculine, the yin and the yang. The feminine is described as that nurturing, compassionate, receptive energy. Male energy is portrayed then as being that decisive, active-oriented, forceful energy. Now, I don't really have a problem understanding yin and yang, or feminine and masculine, but we need to remember that each of those resides within us, irregardless of what your gender is. Each of us has all of that. And they show up in different ways. I want to make sure that we don't stereotype that one is feminine and one is only for women and one is only for men. For example, even in my family, my father was the one who was far more nurturing than my mother. He was the one to say, "I love you" all the time. "I'm proud of you, honey." He gave great big bear hugs. When we talk about the divine feminine, we aren't leaving out the yang, the masculine. It's both the yin and the yang in both of us. But when I talk about the divine feminine, I'm talking about those female images that are holy to us, whether we are male or female, that embody love and creativeness. Love is not exclusive to the divine feminine or the divine masculine, but it's there. And we don't talk about it enough. I see this crazy love energy in parents, whether they're male or female. There's this sort of kind of crazy protectiveness. If any of you are teachers, you know not to get in the way between a parent and a child. I'm in awe of that fierce protective love. And I think it's that fierce protective love that has gotten lost from the depictions of Mary and of the great goddesses. And it is kind of crazy. It's kind of a little out there. It will push you to do unselfish things, to put yourself at risk for someone or something else. And this crazy kind of love, it's counterintuitive. In fact, it's counter-evolution, right? Because evolution says that we're supposed to be the strongest survives, but this crazy love will make you jump in and help out someone who is weaker. It goes against common sense. Let me give you an example that happened to me when I was actually about 11 or 12 years old. You all know that I love animals, right? I love dogs in particular. I love both dogs and cats, but at this time I was living in Alaska. We lived on the edge of town near sort of tundra and some ponds and everything. And we used to ice skate on these ponds in the wintertime because they'd be just completely frozen over. But in the spring, however, our parents were very clear to warn us of the dangers. You didn't go into the pond if you could see through the ice, right? That was one thing. Certainly, obviously, it was broken up. You didn't go there. Well, I remember one cold early spring day, the snow was still out and the pond was breaking up. I was kind of bored and I was looking out the window and I saw some children across the way at the pond. They were younger than I knew them as neighborhood kids. They were younger than I was, maybe 6 or 7 years old, and they were throwing something into the pond. And I don't know, I couldn't see actually. It would be like me trying to see something from here to where Peacemakers is or something like that. It was far away. I couldn't tell exactly what is it they were doing, what they were throwing, but something told me that something was very wrong. And I ran and I grabbed my sister and we ran over there, and sure enough what I saw was that they were throwing puppies into the pond that were about 2 to 3 weeks old, about the age of these puppies. Their eyes were barely open. And my sister and I, without hesitating, just ran into that frozen pond, grabbing these puppies out of the water. I just remember one just desperately trying to paddle. Oh, I still get upset when I think about it. We took off our parkas, we wrapped them up in our parkas, I think we got all of them. And we yelled at these kids, screamed at them. And I remember that we brought them back to their mother who had been chained up, wasn't too far away, a neighbor's house down the way. And she was just frantic for her puppies. And I remember later I told my mom what we had done, and she was so angry. She's like, "What were you thinking? Diving into a frozen pond?" I mean, she knew how dangerous that could be. I realized I wasn't thinking. Because that's not where love resides, right? And for me, this is the lost aspect of the divine feminine, the divine love, that kind of crazy, a little scary, it's an intensity, it's fierce, it's fearless. It's the beloved who wants to practice her drop kick, to shake all the nonsense from us, and is tired of our teacup talk of love. And this is what I think is missing from our image of Mary. And that image of Mary, we say that she's so acquiescent, "Oh yes, here I am, your servant, do as you will." But we forget that she questions God. She questions the angel. "Yeah, I don't know about this." And he says, "Don't be afraid," right? Well, if you remember your biblical stories, anytime you question angels, it doesn't usually end well. So that was a pretty radical idea that she did just even that. But Luke, the Gospel of Luke, of which this comes out of, he was actually all about this crazy kind of love. You think about the story of the prodigal son. Most of you know this story, right? The prodigal son who goes and wastes all of the inheritance that his father gives him. He asks for it, wastes it all. He's just down, homeless. He comes crawling back. And his father, instead of saying, "I told you so," or, "Well, you can only come back if," or "You deserved it," what does he do? He throws a party. Let's kill the fatted calf. Oh my goodness, my son has come home. And there's the story of the woman who searches all day for a penny, even though it says she has a lot to do. It's so precious to her, this penny. Not because that it's worth a penny, but because of just what it is. She'll do anything to find it. And then, of course, there's the story of Mary, who, when she finds out that she's a poor, unwed, and pregnant woman, she goes over to her relative's house, Elizabeth, and she sings a song of joy. It's kind of crazy. She's a poor, unwed mother. But that's for her the radical way of approaching this. This crazy kind of love was what our universalist ancestors understood. That God's love was so vast, so huge, so crazy, that it saved everyone, even the ones that we may not think need or deserve saving. This is kind of what we've lost. This is what we've lost when we reduce the goddesses of old to teenage beauty queens, when we forget the craziness of Mary, her fierceness as she took on the establishment as an unwed mother, as she defied roles of women in her day and faced death head on when no one else would. This crazy kind of love is in each and every single one of us. And the gift of Mary is that she shows that it can be done. That to accept that kind of crazy, fearless part of yourself that says, yes, I will be the bearer of God's love to the world. What if we were all that crazy? What if we let go of our fears and we opened ourselves to giving birth to love like Mary did? To give birth to a crazy kind of love that is willing to face torture and horrific death to get everyone to wake up to this love? To me, that's what Jesus was trying to do, to get us to wake up to a kind of crazy love. It's what Martin Luther King did. It's what Dorothy Day did. It's what Gandhi did. They were kind of crazy. They faced not just their fears, but death and extreme poverty to embrace love. And by crazy, I don't mean out of your mind. I mean into your heart. By crazy, I don't mean delusional or unable to see reality, but rather seeing the world and people fearlessly with love. But how do we live this, we mere mortals? How do we allow ourselves to care, to love that much? Because it's not easy. How do we let go of cynicism or the despair? How do we open and break open our hearts to not let the divine feminine be buried under a teenage beauty queen facade? You know, I get glimpses of that here in this church. Sometimes it's when people just simply sacrifice something to help another person who's going through a tough time. They reach out and hold a hand or offer to take someone somewhere. There are so many ways of you that give your time and your goods to this church or organizations even outside of this church. We did a service a while back and got a list of different people who were doing things outside of the church. We couldn't go through all of them because there were so many. So what does love ask of us? It asks us to accept one another and encourage us for spiritual growth in our congregations. That's our third principle. Both are acts of love. One is for the other, and the other is for ourselves. To accept another is to love them. And man, that's hard work. Because what if they think different from you? I mean, here we're pretty good about people who look different from us. But what if they think different? That's a really tough one for us. What does love ask of us? That's the question that I'd like you to begin to answer today. We start with where we are. I invite you all to just come to church, because this is where we wrestle with these questions, and we do it together. Everyone has an answer that's right for them. May not be right for the next person over. What does love ask of you? Maybe just today. Does it ask us to sacrifice all that we have and all that we are? Boy, I hope not. But maybe it's just asking us to love a little bit more, to give a bit more when you can, to open your heart just one more little inch. Maybe it's when we don't hightail it out of town, pack our bags, when we hear the beloved is in a playful, drunken mood. Maybe we stay and face what love is asking of us. You could just live a life with a more tame form of love, the teacup talk of love that talks sweetly. We all admire that teenage beauty queen, after all, but honestly, where's the fun in that? Why not dare to be radical? To jump into the frozen pond, to let love drop kick you a few times when she's in that drunken, playful mood? What does love ask of you today? So I invite you this morning, as we leave this journey together, to just think and meditate on this. Maybe not think here, think here. What is love asking of you today?